When Jacob, this is back into Jacob and the rest of the family now. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" So they were having trouble and they just didn't know what to do about it. They were all just kind of standing around looking at each other. "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" He continued, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, that we may live and not die." You can live a long time while you're without eating a lot of food, while your body gradually wastes away. I don't know how much food they had in reserve. I don't know how much they were managing to pick out from the land as the resources gradually withered. But it can go on for a long time, you know. They would have been getting angry and malcontent and malnourished. But they could go on for a long time like that. Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Benjamin is the prized son now, the only other son of Rachel. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain, for the famine was also in the land of Canaan, which is where they were still living at the time. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the one who sold grain to all its people. So he's in charge of all the distribution efforts. At some point in a future lesson, I'm going to go over some of the information from Egypt that we have about this. I'm not going to do it right now, though. But it's just as a quick little aside, Egypt was split up. Egypt was split up into regions, kind of like how we have states in the United States. Today we call them nomes. And the term, I don't know what the actual Egyptian term was for, but we have come up with the term nome, Nome. It was basically the equivalent of a state, and each nome had a nomarch, or a governor, as it's listed here, which would be equivalent to a governor. And these governors, these nomarchs, administered their nome on behalf of Pharaoh. But I'll get into more of a Egypt-oriented lesson at some point. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. "Where did you come from?" he said. So they didn't recognize him. So let's think about this. So Joseph becomes appointed. Joseph is sold into slavery when he's 17 years old. He becomes appointed prime minister of Egypt at 30. They have 7 years of plenty that pass, and now we are in at least the first year of famine. So that's year 8, maybe-ish. So he's now about 38. So it's been more than 20 years. He was 17 the last time they saw him. Well, there's a big difference between a 17-year-old boy and a 37-year-old man. Okay? Even at 17, most males are not done physically developing, and will look quite a bit different in a few years when they do finish physically developing. You could look at a lot of, for example, high school senior photos of boys and then compare them to what they look like 5 or 6 or 7 years later, and they'll look a lot different. That's not really true for me, okay? I was one of those guys who went through the physical maturation process really early. This isn't true for most girls either. Girls will go through their development process much earlier and will settle into their adult form much earlier, and they won't look as different after a certain period of time. And I actually followed a growth pattern that was more similar to most girls, because I basically had my adult body at 14. That's not true for most males. Most males, including most of my classmates, will not really go through their true physical maturity until after that. And even at 17, they could still change quite a bit from 17 to, say, 22 or 27. So Joseph had last been seen by them at 17. He's now like 38. They're older than him, although not by a whole heck of a lot. They would have been probably in their 20s. Now they're in their 40s. They wouldn't have changed as much because they were already adults. Plus, there's 10 of them. Plus, they probably have introduced themselves by name. He has totally looked different. He would have at 17. He probably didn't have a full beard anyway when the last saw him. But he would be dressed up in the Egyptian garb. He'd have the Egyptian clothes on, the Egyptian face paint on. They think he's dead anyway, as we'll find out. They're not expecting to see him. They're not expecting him to even be alive still. So they're not going to be thinking about it. I don't know if he necessarily expected to see them, but you do have 10 guys coming down all together, looking remarkably like his 10 brothers. They probably identified themselves by name to somebody when they came in. And so it makes sense then that he would recognize them before they recognized him. From the land of Canaan, they replied, to buy food. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams about them and said to them, because he had forgotten, remember? He had put that out of his mind. We saw that acknowledged back when he had his firstborn son. That he had put those old dreams, those youthful teenage dreams, out of his mind. And now he remembers them. And said to them, "You are spies! You have come to see where our land is unprotected." "No, my lord," they answered. "Your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. Your servants, not the same woman, but they are all sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies." "No," he said to them. "You have come to see where our land is unprotected." They replied, "Your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man, who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more." So they don't even expect that Joseph is still alive. 22 years later, they're assuming he has died. He's gone. Joseph said to them, "It is just as I told you. You are spies. And this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies." And he put them all in custody for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this, and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back for your starving households." I don't know if he changed his mind in those 3 days, or he was always planning on doing that and simply made them think about it for a few days, make them stew about it. I don't know. I really don't. The text doesn't say. But you must bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified, and that you may not die. This they proceeded to do. They said to one another, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life." Now, we didn't read about that. You go back to the chapter where that happened, in chapter 37, and we don't read anything about Joseph pleading with them for his life. He must have been doing it, probably while he was in the well, but we don't read about that here. It's another example where the details, not all the details of the story are included. Some of them are referred to, some of them are kind of obliquely referenced. And here we get a little bit more information about the story than we got in the actual telling of the story. But that's just one of those things you have to be aware of when you read these old Hebrew stories, that not every detail is going to be mentioned. Because when we actually read the story of the brothers dealing with Joseph, we didn't read anything about Joseph pleading for his life. But here, we know that we must have, because it's mentioned as the brothers are talking to each other. So they said to one another, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we did not listen. That's why this distress has come upon us now. Reuben replied, Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now he must give an accounting for his blood. The sins of some men go to the place of judgment. Paul's going to say this in 1 Timothy. The sins of some men go to the place of judgment well ahead of them, are obvious. They're obvious and they reach the place of judgment well ahead of them. The sins of some men trail behind. So sometimes your sins are hidden and trail behind you. People don't know that you're sinning. They don't know what you've done. But it'll be found out eventually. One day, sooner or later, somehow or another, the truth will have its day. God will have his day. It may take 20 years. Or it may happen right away. But one way or another. They did not realize that Joseph could understand them since he was using an interpreter. So they're having this conversation with each other right there in his presence. So they're talking to each other in their own native language. And Joseph, of course, who grew up speaking that language, can understand them. He was communicating to them officially with an interpreter, obviously. But he can speak their language, so when they're talking to each other, he can understand what they're saying. He turned away from them and began to weep. So this is getting to be pretty much for him. But he turned back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Simeon, of course, was the second born of Jacob. I'm not sure exactly what the significance is of him taking the second born instead of Reuben, the firstborn. Probably because Reuben had vouched for him. Reuben had, as Reuben himself just says here, Reuben had told them not to do what they were going to do. So I'm guessing he's passing up on Reuben for the role of hostage. He would have gone for the firstborn. Obviously, he would do that. That's the one that you're going to take hostage. But which would be Reuben. But I'm guessing he's passing up on Reuben on account of Reuben having been the one to show mercy to him back when he was in distress. So he's passing Reuben and going on to Simeon. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to put each man's silver back. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain. So he is going to give them the food they came there to get. To put each man's silver back in his sack. So they came to buy this food with silver. And they're going to get that silver back. So it's going to look like they stole it or got off with it for free. And to give them provisions for their journey. After this was done for them, they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left. At the place where they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey. And he saw his silver in the mouth of his sack. My silver has been returned, he said to his brothers. Here it is in my sack. Their hearts sank, and they turned to each other trembling and said, What is this that God has done to us? Because now they can't go back to Egypt without being accused of being thieves. When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. They said, The man who is Lord over the land spoke harshly to us, and treated us as though we were spying on the land. But we said to him, We are honest men, we are not spies. We were 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in Canaan. And the man who is Lord over the land said to us, This is how I will know whether you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me, and take food for your starving households, and go. Bring your youngest brother to me, so I will know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can move about freely, trade, or move about freely in the land. As they were emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his pouch of silver. When they and their father saw the money pouches, they were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me." Then Reuben said to his father, "You may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back." But Jacob said, "My son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow," or Sheol, in sorrow. Jacob is still playing favorites here. It was Jacob's penchant for showing favoritism that led to this family dysfunction in the first place. And even now, after all this time, he is still showing favorites.